Chapter 11. A Young Vallakovich. Navarra had a hard time concentrating as they talked with the Baron. Van Richten and Elvire had left them after the battle at the coffin shop, and no one dared guess what had become of Rowan.
"Did you hear me, Deputy?" the Baron asked Navarra.
The Baron huffed.
"You need to help the new sheriff go to people's houses, knock on their doors, and make sure they're coming to the festival tomorrow."
"Oh, right," Navarra said. "But shouldn't people know about the festival already, since there are all those posters throughout town?" Her tired legs begged to sit down on one of the plush sofas that adorned the parlor, but she dared not show any disrespect for fear of the Baron's ill temper.
"Of course they know," he said, pacing back and forth across the room. "Your job is to round up the stubborn half-wits who stay home anyways. You must make them come, at all costs."
"My dear," said the Baroness to her husband. Lady Petrovna looked at the bruises on Navarra's arms, the gashes on Henry's face, and blood on Irina's bodice. "These people have been through a lot today. They've just saved the town from vampires. Maybe we could give them a break."
The Baron rounded on her. "I know what heroics they did," he said harshly. "And I don't need you repeating things back to me, woman. They're the only enforcers in this town, and if we don't want another attack, we need to make sure they do their job. People need to come to the festival, and they need to be happy about it. If we could leave the Shadowfell by tomorrow, then we won't have to worry about vampires again."
An explosion like fireworks went off on some floor above them, and the entire house shook.
"Blast that good-for-nothing boy!"
the Baron shouted, saving a decorative vase that toppled off a shelf. He set the vase back and took out a kerchief to wipe the sweat from his brow. Then he turned back to Henry and Navarra.
"Where was I?"
"The festival?" Navarra asked.
"The festival! Get every last person to attend. Go from door to door if you have to. And you, Miss," he said to Irina, "I'm glad you're helping my sheriff and deputy, but don't expect to get paid. I can't afford another hire right now."
"My name is Irina," she said, glaring at the burgomaster. "You're Kolyan Indirevich's daughter," Lady Petrovna said, walking over to Irina. "I'm so sorry about what happened to you yesterday. Isaac was troubled, even as a boy. He was orphaned, you see, 14 years ago." "14?" Irina asked. "It's a tragic story, really." Lady Petrovna's small pointed chin quivered slightly. "On his way back from fishing at Lake Zarevich with his family, they were attacked by wolves. His parents died, and his sister disappeared into the woods. He came stumbling back to Vallaki with one arm bitten off. And since he had no other kin, he was sent to the orphanage. Strangely enough, his arm grew back one night. That dreadful claw. No one knows why." She glanced at her husband and patted her hair as if to make sure her tight grey bun still sat on top of her head. "But I knew Isaac was no good after hearing rumors that he burnt down that orphanage."
"Don't blame me for having pity on him," the Baron snapped. "You didn't complain when we took him into our home."
"I never liked having him here," the Baroness said. "He was always mean to my poor Victor." "How old was his sister when she went missing?" Henry asked, frowning. "I think she was around 5 or 6 years old," said the Baroness. Irina's face turned a shade of green. "Father Lucian said I was found 14 years ago, coming out of that wood near the lake. I was 6. "Irina," Navarra said, feeling Irina's hand gripping hers like a vice. "Are you saying that Isaac Strasny was your brother?" It all added up. Irina swallowed. "I guess I know where I come from now." All Navarra could do was stand there, lending her hand to be held. "Where did Isaac get those dolls?" Henry asked, glaring at the husband and wife. "From Gadolf Blinsky, the toy maker in town," Lady Petrovna said. Henry looked at Navarra and Irina. "We need to talk to him."
"Blinsky," the Baron said. "He's the town's festival decorator, and a poor one at that. When you see him, tell Blinsky to set up the proper banners for the festival this time. I want yellow banners. Yellow, not that drab grey he always uses."
Another explosion sounded above, shaking the house again, and this time ending with a shattered vase on the floor. The Baron's face went red.
"That irresponsible, blasted son of a—"
He looked over at his wife.
"It's your fault he's like this. He gets his melancholy humour from your side of the family. I mean it this time, Lydia. If he doesn't come to the festival, I'm feeding him to the wolves."
"Oh, but he's so precocious," she whined. "He needs privacy for the development of his intellect."
"He needs a good whipping is what he needs. If Isaac was still around— Say, Henry, you're the new sheriff. I need you to beat some sense into that boy."
"Your own son doesn't attend the festivals?" Henry asked. The Baron called for his dogs. The two hounds bounded into the room and licked at their master's hand. Then the Baron pulled a couple treats from his pockets, and the dogs devoured them.
"Tell that boy when you see him, he'd better be at the festival this time, or else."
Navarra and the other two agreed to see Victor. They could not care less if Victor came to his father's festival or not. It was curiosity that impelled them up the narrow stairs to the attic, where Victor was said to spend most of his time. "Those flashes of light we saw the other day," Irina said. "They must have been from the Baron's son." "Then we'd better be careful," Henry said. "Who knows what kind of magic he's weaving up there?" Henry, Irina, and Navarra walked into the attic storage room, a muddle of furniture and wall decor draped in white sheets. A clear footpath zigzagged through the maze of covered things to a door with a painted skull. A sign hung from the doorknob that read, "All is not well." A voice issued from behind the door, but when Henry knocked, it went quiet. "Hello, Victor? I'm Henry, the new sheriff." "Just open the door," said Navarra, when no response came. Henry opened it.
"Oi! What do you think you're doing coming into me room?"
A gangly young man, perched on a stool with a large open book in his hands, cocked his head at the newcomers. Papers were littered across 3 tables, and there was a tall bookcase in the corner, shelved with glass jars, bones, and other trinkets. "You must be Victor," Henry said, walking into the room with Irina and Navarra. "Your father sent us to tell you to come—"
"That bastard sent 3 of you,"
Victor said, cutting Henry off.
"Well, you can tell him I'm not going. And you can leave too."
His accent mimicked that of a country yokel, having none of the pompous air his parents put on. A skeleton cat jumped up on one of the tables, scattering a few papers. 4 other skeleton cats watched the papers drift to the floor with their eyeless sockets. Henry said, looking at the creatures. "You shouldn't be casting necromancy spells."
"It's not necromancy,"
Victor said. He waved a wand and threw an illusion over the cats to clothe them in fur. "I have divine magic," Henry said, I can sense they're undead. Not if I use Nistel's magic aura, Victor rebutted, flipping through his book and pointing his wand at the cats again. That spell hides their true identity from your prying holy magic. Now you have no way of knowing they're undead, preacher man. You just admitted it. Shit! Who are you people anyway? Like I said, I'm Henry, the sheriff. Henry pointed to himself. You're the bloke that offed Isaac. Kudos to you. I would have liked to see that. But listen, I need to work. I have a lot of important things to do. He hopped off his stool and went to the table in the middle of the room. What book do you have there? Henry asked. Victor clenched the large tome to his chest. My spellbook, he said defensively. You must be a wizard. I'm Navarra, the deputy. I can do magic too. She held out her hand, and a figure of a ghostly cat emerged from her palm. It leapt from her hand and walked toward the fleshless cat on the table. The skeleton cat hissed and batted at the illusion, making it disappear. What work are you doing that's so important? She asked. I'm practicing, Victor said, moving his wand in the air as if he were going to cast a spell. Specifically, I'm working on Teleportation Circle. It's a powerful spell. I haven't mastered it just yet, but when I do, I'm getting out of this hellhole. Oh, I can teleport, Navarra said. Watch this. She touched the crystal on her necklace and vanished. Instantly, she reappeared a few feet away, beaming. Victor was shaking his head. That's not Teleportation Circle, you dummy. That's a fairy step spell. I need to travel across the world, across planes of existence, not across the bloody house. It's called Fairy Door, Navarra said, and it's still a good spell. I admire your ingenuity, Victor, Henry said. I've heard of wizards who spend years learning that conjuration spell. But like I said, you can't go around practicing necromancy. Since when did animating animal bones become a crime? I'm doing nothing wrong. Victor glared at Henry through bangs of dark, greasy hair. Necromancy is frowned upon at the houses of Merlin, Navarra said, remembering Henry had spent time there. But I do think Henry's right. One needs to be careful casting spells like that here in Barovia. Precisely, Henry said. This valley is riddled with evil, and necromancy is at the root of it. Victor narrowed his eyes. I'm not going to stand here and listen to you preach your morals. Leave me alone. That is a magnificent spellbook, Navarra said, craning her neck to view the cover. The leather-bound tome was inlaid with silver glyphs running up the spine and winding around the front in an intricate pattern. It was an old book, crafted by a skilled mage, not by a boy hiding from his parents in the attic. Could we see it? Henry asked, taking a step toward Victor. No! Back off! Victor cradled the book. Listen, Victor, I'm asking nicely, Henry said. As sheriff, I need to make sure there isn't anything in that book that could harm anyone. I'd never hurt anyone. You just want to take it away from me. Well, you can't have it. Now all of you, bugger off. Victor, Henry said, not backing down. Navarra put a hand on Henry's arm. I'll handle this, she said to him. Victor, we only want to see what's in the book. We don't want to take it from you. Then she moved her hand and whispered a soothing incantation. Victor's countenance softened, and his grip on the tome relaxed. Now, Navarra said, may I see it? Of course, Victor said, handing it over. The book was heavy and its many pages thick. Navarra read a name inscribed on the inside of the front cover. Mordenkainen. Henry's eyes went wide. That can't be right. He looked over Navarra's shoulder and his jaw dropped. Holy shit! I would think it's a copy, Navarra said, flipping through page after page of spells, unable to hold her excitement. But they don't make copies like this. You can't forge a spellbook. Victor, how did the spellbook of the most famous wizard who ever lived end up in Barovia? Amazing, right? Victor smiled with pride. Where did you get it? Navarra asked. I found it. Well, that bloke Bluto from town found it. That idiot fisherman handed it over to me for a few silvers. Probably spent it all at the pub. But the book's mine now. Where did he find it? He said he fished it out of the pool under the Tsare Falls. Navarra turned to Henry and Irina. Remember the story Stanimir told us about the mad mage who lives on Mount Baratok? Stanimir said that wizard fell from the very same waterfall. Do you think it was him? Mordenkainen? Henry raised his eyebrow. No. I mean, how could it be? Mordenkainen was the headmaster at the Houses of Merlin 200 years ago. Stanimir said the wizard who confronted Strahd was defeated only 1 year ago. Mordenkainen was human, not some elf who could live hundreds of years. And yet, here is his book. Navarra ran a hand over the open page in front of her. My book, Victor reminded them. I never heard of this Mordenkainen fellow before I got it, but he's wicked with spells. Spells I'm going to learn. Every spell under the sun must be in here, Henry said in awe, reading the fine script that described complex arcane magic. Banishment, detect thoughts, polymorph, globe of invulnerability. Navarra, look at this. Henry read the titles of the powerful spells and pointed to them. Mordenkainen's magnificent mansion. Telekinesis. Wow. Imprisonment and astral projection? This is too much. Oh, here, look. Animate dead. Necromancy. Henry put his hand on the page as if to tear it out. We should get rid of this one and any other spells like it. Victor grimaced. Oh, don't do that. Navarra, does he have to rip me book? Victor looked at the warlock with pleading eyes set in a pasty face. Irina, who had been quiet during the whole conversation, spoke up. No, he doesn't, she said firmly. Henry, what do you think you're doing? Victor has done nothing wrong. You're bullying him. Just leave him be. And you, Navarra, she said, turning to the warlock, her eyes narrowing. I can't believe you would charm him. After what we've been through? I can tell that's what you cast on him. Don't you remember that feeling of helplessness and foolishness after falling under Strahd's enchantment? Why would you ever use that kind of spell? Navarra's heart sank and felt a pang of guilt. I'm not making Victor do anything bad. I'm just nudging him, encouraging him to trust us. As to charming people, Gostomir said, I don't care what Gostomir said. It's wrong. Irina's eyes were set like steel. Henry released the page, and Navarra dropped her spell. Hey, Victor said, snatching his book back. I think we should go, Irina said. I'm sorry we disturbed you, Victor. It's all right, Victor said, smirking. The elf chick can stay. He sauntered over to a table and sat down, then traced his finger over the cover of his tome and winked at Navarra. You can, read me book if you want. Navarra, you really need to end your charm, Irina said, annoyed. Oh, she did. Victor leaned on the table, obviously gawking at Navarra's backside. I felt her spell slip right off. So, Navarra, you want to stick around? I can show you some spells if you know what I mean. Thank you, Victor, Navarra said, ignoring his advances. But I should be going. If you do figure out that teleportation circle, you should let us know. You do realize she charmed you, Irina said to Victor. Yeah, she did. He gave a nod to Navarra and smirked again. But don't any of you blokes try stealing me book again. Just as they were leaving through the mess in the attic, something shiny caught Navarra's eye. It was a small hand-sized mirror, sitting among other disregarded things. She picked it up. Victor, she said, popping her head back in his room, can I have this? Sure, I guess, he said. Here. Navarra fished in her pack and pulled out a small ivory comb and offered it to him. I'll trade you for this. Blimey, he said, taking the comb. It was gilded and had finely carved teeth. That mirror is worthless, you know. Not for me. Thanks, Victor. Victor smiled and stashed the comb in his shirt. That was quite the trade, Navarra, Henry said when they left. You could have sold that comb for a decent price. I know, but I wanted to give it to him. She felt bad for Victor, regardless of his surly demeanor. They went back to the tavern, weary and hungry. I'm going to take a nice long bath, Navarra said. I could eat a wolf, Henry said. In fact, I will eat a wolf. I remember I saw those wolf steaks on the menu. They're 1 electrum piece each, said Irina. Then she licked her lips and said, Screw it, I want a steak too. My armor is going to need some tending after. Henry froze when he reached their bedroom. The door was open and a lantern was lit. The flame burned dimly, illuminating the room just enough to show a sleeping white cat on Rowan's bed. Fearing the worst, Henry ran over and grabbed the cat by the scruff of its neck, giving it a good shake. What game are you playing at? Henry demanded. The cat spat and hissed and bit Henry's hand. He cursed and dropped the animal. The cat ran to the middle of the room and transformed. Rowan appeared before them all, eyes bloodshot and ringed with dark circles. Rowan? Navarra asked, hesitating. I'm not what you think. Rowan held out her hands in surrender. Henry took note of the legs on a wooden chair in the corner of the room, deliberating whether he should snap one off to make a stake. Sit down over there on the far bed and explain yourself. Rowan moved to the bed. Irina's hand twitched toward her sword, while Navarra flexed her fingers. Rowan didn't blame them. Well? Henry asked. I want to say, first, that I never knew I could come back from the dead. Henry took a few steps toward the wooden chair. It's not an ability I knew I inherited, she said. Inherited? Navarra tilted her head. Rowan looked down at her interlocked fingers. She had no choice. She could not keep her secret hidden any longer. I told you all that my mother was a druid, but I didn't tell you everything about my father. He was more than a murderer. He was a vampire. She looked up briefly to see the confused expressions on her friends' faces. He was the same vampire who turned Van Richten's son. But I am not my father. She wanted to add that she wasn't a monster, that she was not like those horrid creatures at the coffin shop. But after waking from death, just like a full vampire, and after having a vision of some dark power that called her by name, she questioned whether she might not be a monster. You're half vampire? Henry asked. A Dhampir, Rowan said, then waited for their condemnation. How could they trust her, after knowing she kept secrets from them? How could they accept her, knowing what she was? But all three of them relaxed, and Navarra looked at Rowan with sympathetic eyes. "What are you going to do with me?" Rowan ventured to ask. "If you've been part vampire since before we met, then why should this change anything?" Irina said. "I trust you." Rowan looked to Henry and Navarra. "Your father seems to get worse and worse every time we hear about him," Navarra said. "I'm sorry for all you've been through." She sat on the bed next to Rowan, and Herkomoid hopped from Navarra's shoulders and went over to her, nudging her hand with his snout. Rowan pet the pseudo-dragon's head and felt the tension in her exhausted body dissipate. "I just wish you would have told us sooner," Henry said. "But I understand why you were afraid to." "Thank you," Rowan said. "I'm glad you're back, Whiskers," he said. "Even if you did bite me." Rowan smirked. "Do you feel any different?" Navarra asked her. "After coming back, I mean." "I don't think so. I'm just tired." "What other things can you do?" Navarra prodded. "Or what other vampiric abilities did you inherit?" "I don't know if it's an ability so much as a curse, but I don't have a reflection." Navarra took out the mirror from the attic and flashed her. "Whoa, Rowan, it's like you're not even here." She moved the mirror around, finding no one else on the bed but herself and Herkomoid. "So that's why you didn't want Vasily to take out his mirror," Irina said. "Back when we first came to the inn." Rowan nodded. "But how could you come back from the dead unless you had a coffin here?" Navarra asked. "And how many lives does a Dhampir have? Are you like a cat with 9 lives?" "I have no idea," Rowan said, willing her friends to believe her. "I awoke in a grave behind St. Andrew's, where the tombstone had my name on it. I never knew where I grew up with my mother. But I guess—" She paused. "Now you know," Henry said. "You're from Barovia."